All right, guys, what's going on? This is Coach Dan Covert here with Covert Fitness and Wellness. This is my journey into becoming a coach. I wanted to discuss things that I went through early on, what I did, how I overcame those things, my qualifications, etc. Basically, why I believe I'm uniquely qualified to help with all aspects of your overall fitness and your overall wellness. So early on in my journey, now we're going back about 15 years or so ago. Really we're going back to adolescence, but I got really into kind of managing and trying to overcome aspects of my overall health and wellness, as well as getting into the gym in my early 20s. I'm 35 now. And, the reason I say starts in adolescence is as an adolescent, I struggled a lot with various aspects of my mental health. Grew up in kind of a tough environment, a lot of conflict in my environment day to day, as well as just general depression, anxiety, issues that really seemed to run in my bloodline. And then on top of that, I was very skinny, very what we might call a late bloomer. Didn't have a lot of confidence early on from that. So you can imagine when I stepped foot in a gym for the first time, which really was in high school, but when I got serious about the gym, which was probably my early 20s, I would say, I realized very quickly that I wasn't as strong as my peers. Just coming in, couldn't make progress or get as strong as my peers. Didn't seem to gain muscle as fast, and really was very injury prone. I always like to joke with people, I grew up with 7-inch wrists. I can fit my hand around my wrists. So for me, being that late bloomer, being very skinny, being very prone to injury, you can imagine it was an uphill battle. And then on top of that, I had the kind of, mental health struggles mixed in with it. When I was younger, really when I was 18, I was put on medications, antidepressants for that, not really knowing, the kind of dangers of those. Not saying that those don't have a place and that they didn't help, and they definitely can. But I think a lot of people are overprescribed and not really told about the dangers and long-term effects. For another video, another day. Point being, though, is when I first stepped in the gym, I was doing all the normal, bodybuilding. As a kid, just like everybody else, the first, I think, exposure to the gym and weights was looking at Arnold. I'm a 90s kid, so Arnold was still making movies. He was very much still the kind of the upper echelon, the pinnacle of what, fitness looked like at that time period. So, I was doing all those bodybuilding splits. I think I followed like Arnold and Franco Columbo's stuff early on. Didn't get really any gains out of it. And more, even more than not getting gains, I was constantly hurt from those programs, the amount of volume, the exercise selection, etc. So we'll get into that as this video goes. But I kind of realized quickly that this wasn't working for me, and I was so beat up after really my first 6 to 12 months that I kind of didn't even know if the gym was for me. But I'm a pretty resilient individual. I've always been a researcher. I've always been a deep researcher, deep thinker. So I figured, okay, let's kind of see what I can learn about this from doing some actual research. What kind of data exists on this? It also occurred to me early on that a lot of the guys, the Arnolds, the Francos, and then the guys in the gym who you would think, many people think, oh, if I want to get big and strong, look to the biggest, strongest guy in the gym. A lot of these individuals, I also realized and gathered early on that they were doing steroids. I had friends in my early 20s who were doing steroids, and that was something that I didn't really want to do. So I kind of went to, okay, there's got to be some people that do this naturally. What do they do? One of the earliest voices, I think the earliest kind of voice that really changed the course for me was a coach named Jay Ferrugia. Shout out to Coach Ferrugia. I've learned from Jay. I have read all of his stuff over the years. He had a very popular blog. Still does, still very prominent name. He's worked with celebrities and athletes and whatnot. But he really was kind of advertising, for what we call the hard gainer, which spoke to me. He was a skinny hard gainer himself, constant injury prone, couldn't make progress doing the bodybuilding programs and whatnot until he kind of learned what he was doing. And he introduced me to a totally different way of working out, totally different exercise selection, how to make things more user-friendly. Introduced me to the concept of a 5x5 program, a sort of Monday, Wednesday, Friday full body, what's kind of popularly known now as like a Reg Park program. If you don't know Reg Park, look into him. That was actually Arnold's mentor, and Arnold did those programs to get most of his gains long before the steroids and the Mr. Olympia. Just kind of fun fact. But I started doing... I would just do Jay's programs, and they started to work. I learned about how to eat for the gains. I learned about how to set the program up. I learned about kind of protecting the fact that my joints are not so forgiving. And I did gain my first maybe 15, 20 pounds, somewhere in there. A lot of that was just from eating so much and kind of taking on a little bit extra weight and maybe some water weight. But nonetheless, I definitely, had a noticeable transformation. I was probably around 22, 23 at this time. As I kind of got my confidence, my stripes about me, I then realized that there was a lot of guys who were probably, a lot of people in general who were probably dealing with these things. So I became a personal trainer. I became a certified personal trainer at the time. I just wanted to get into coaching people. I had gone to school for a little bit for first music in college, and then because I was a music artist for a long time, but then I kind of was getting into the gym, and I was at one point considering being a physical therapist. I kind of realized that, I don't know why I realized early on that the medical industry across all aspects was kind of corrupted and not really, let's say, doing things correctly. Which again, we'll get into a little more in this video, and as we go, you'll see this is a reoccurring theme with me. So I didn't really have much else kind of going for me at the time. I was kind of phasing out of my run with music, and I got really into coaching, got really into training people, really into training myself. Became the head trainer at a Powerhouse gym. If anybody on the East Coast of the U.S. knows about Powerhouse, they were kind of iconic name for a long time in bodybuilding, powerlifting. We had one of the last kind of surviving establishments in Trenton, New Jersey. I was the head trainer there. I kind of built their personal training. They told me they didn't think it would work based on the demographic. I said, give me a shot. I built it. I had 5 trainers working under me. Got really into, from that culture, powerlifting. Because I realized early on, and again, you'll see a theme with this channel, was that you have to get stronger, measurably and progressively. You must get stronger. You cannot get bigger. You can do all the supersets, drop sets, pump sets, but you got to get stronger in a pretty somewhat narrow rep range, at least when you're starting out. So I got very acquainted with getting stronger, and then I realized from being around the Powerhouse culture that there was a lot, powerlifting was a thing, and I had no genetics for it. But I realized that my deadlift was decent. I was probably around the time like 180 pounds. And, I got to like a 4-plate deadlift, which was for me at the time really something. My bench was, my shoulders would still bother me all the time. It was tough for me to grow a chest. But even deadlifting, I was dealing with a lot of low back pain, a lot of shoulder pain, wrist pain. When I was benching and whatnot. So I still realized there was a lot I didn't know, and that I was pretty beat up still, despite having made gains. So at one point, my shoulders got to the point where I thought I was going to need surgery on my one shoulder, because it got to the point where it hurt all the time. And that was when I really realized that I needed to, kind of learn some more. And then I also realized that I was in charge of training others. And so I wanted to make sure that I knew. And like I said, having gone to college for a brief time to kind of go the physical therapy track, I was always interested in rehabilitative and corrective exercise, and just from my own journey. So I ended up doing some more research, going in the trenches, doing research. And I found Eric Cressy. Shout out to Coach Cressy, who I believe is literally the best in the world, especially when it comes to the shoulder. Coach Cressy Sorry about that. Coach Cressy. I ended up contacting Cressy Sports Performance. They're in Florida and Massachusetts. I contacted their Massachusetts facility at the time, and they said, "Why don't you come on up? Come up for 5 days. Spend 5 days here." Coach Cressy had a decent internet presence at that time, but he wasn't near the name he is now. I mean, he was working with major league players at that time in the MLB, doing, strength training and rehab for a lot of pitchers and whatnot, but definitely was kind of more, I would say, underground. This is also prior to this sort of social media explosion. Like, social media was around, but it wasn't as household as it is now. Went up, trained with Coach Cressy for 5 days. Learned still the foundation of everything that I know and use. And then I ended up reading a lot of Eric Cressy's work and going to his seminars and, long after I had actually trained with him as a client. Eric assessed me personally, wrote my program personally. The program was so effective, and what I learned was so effective that in 3.5 months, my deadlift went from 405 with back pain to 500 with no pain. I didn't gain. I was 181 pounds because I was powerlifting in the 181 class, natural. Shoulders never hurt again. Really, all my joint pain had vanished. All my lifts went up, squat went up, bench went up. It was unbelievable, and I started using and applying what I learned with Coach Cressy. And I ended up, kind of becoming known in my area as sort of like, the rehab guy, the guy that you came to see when you were beat up in the gym or you couldn't make progress because you were injured. And then I ended up also through Eric Cressy's network, I ended up becoming a student of, shout out to Coach Michael Boyle at MBSC. Mike Boyle, know Mike personally, been to a ton of his seminars, certified through MBSC, my certified functional strength coach. Spent a lot of time up there at his Massachusetts facility. Really great staff, really great people, and just, an absolute pioneer in the strength training, in the functional strength training world. Also within those years following, got affiliated with Charlie Weingroff. Charlie Weingroff is a world-renowned doctor of physical therapy. Operates, I believe he still does, operates out of New Jersey. Saw Dr. Weingroff personally as a patient twice, and just learned a ton from him as well. Again, really pioneer of kind of merging the medical model with the strength and conditioning side. So, point being is, what's that quote people say? I am by the mercy of my teachers. When people say, how do you know this, or you do this so well? All credit to the individuals that helped me get here. They absolutely changed the game for me. Never have dealt with joint pain again. Learned how to program properly. Learned how to just navigate the whole thing. It was digestible to me, and then I could make it digestible to my clients, which was obviously very important. And I'm proud to say that I've taken people with 10 years of back pain who've been to chiropractors and physical therapists and all these things, and I look at what they're doing, and there's no assessment process, and it's not rooted in anything current, and I just kind of scoff. And I routinely take people in 6 to 8 weeks, and get rid of their back pain, get rid of their shoulder pain, what have you. And it's all from the student that I became from these individuals. So this kind of takes you to my, mid into late 20s. I kind of spent years from probably about 24 right through my late 20s, building my business in person, learning, still always learning, but did the bulk of my foundational learning then. And then when I was, I don't know, I must have been 29 or 30, that was when the COVID era pandemic happened. And in New Jersey, we had quite draconian lockdowns. So long story short, my gym, which was where I rented and housed, at that point I had brought my own business model. We changed our model at the gym I was at, the Powerhouse. I brought my own model to Powerhouse. I was, just paying them a flat rent and bringing in who I wanted. That was where I housed my business. Gym closed down for 8 months, 10 months. Most gyms couldn't sustain that. They closed. They folded even after the doors were allowed back open. And I didn't have a business anymore. So I spent a few years, just kind of wandering the U.S., lived in Florida for the bulk of that. Definitely shout out my favorite state, want to go back. And lived in Arizona for some time, lived in Oregon for a little bit, really just drove all of America, like 45 states, kind of took a break and recalibrated my direction. Now, this time I was also dealing with some new and unexplained health issues of my own that I'll probably get into more in depth in my articles and videos as we go. There was kind of various things going on, so I don't want to go too far into the details of it, but long story short, due to some specific health problems I had, my hormones tanked, which tanked my mood and obviously my gains and my confidence. Remember, I was an anxious kid, dealt with a lot of adversity. A lot of my identity, a lot of my confidence was tied up in what I was able to do in the gym, getting big and strong and feeling capable. That was a difficult time for me. This was a kind of a new territory for me because I had kind of learned a lot about the fallacies of physical therapy and how people coach fitness, and then the fallacies of psychiatry and mental health. But I was new to sort of the endocrinology world, and the like hardcore medical side of things. And I knew enough, but, was by no means an expert. So around that time, I went to, 6 different physicians, MDs, urologists, NPs, endocrinologists. None of them could accurately, I realized early on, even call for labs, let alone analyze them and then treat me. They had really nothing to say, no idea what they were doing. I realized early on that there was kind of hormones, especially men's hormones, are kind of this like unspoken territory. We don't want to deal with that. I kind of know why that is. I mean, technically it's theory, but I've talked to enough. There's a top-down influence of wanting to push medications because that's where money's made. There's insurance companies that simply won't cover lab tests for people. There's a lot of things. There's also there really is a war on masculinity, and testosterone has become kind of like a dirty word. So if you want to do anything around testosterone, you're going to fight an uphill battle. So long story short, I ended up having to do another 2 years in the trenches with going back and teaching myself, endocrinology from the bottom up, and just kind of the science of really how all your labs intersect and how everything influences hormones and neuroendocrinology. Again, by the mercy of my teacher, shout out to guys like Advanced Fundamental Health, my guy Dave Lee. I've talked to Dave personally. Really, in my opinion, the best in the space of men's hormones, no nonsense. And I read all his books, listened to all his lectures, and really kind of started to see that I wasn't being, once again, kind of handled properly. In terms of the protocols I was being given, and just the right labs weren't even being called for. The right tests weren't even being called for. So I started calling my own labs. I called a series of 10 labs over like 2.5 years. Tried a bunch of interventions naturally. Basically, it ended up for me in, doing everything I could do to avoid going on TRT at 35 years old, because it can raise fertility concerns, and I always prided myself on being a natural lifter. I knew I'd do it eventually, but I didn't want to pull the trigger this soon. Long story short, after the 10 labs and all the conservative treatments in the world to try to get back, realized that I was going to have to pull the trigger. And this is actually fairly recently for me. I had the knowledge a few years back, but I still kind of held out to try everything I could do to like withhold from TRT. And long story short, ended up going on. Don't regret it at all, because I know I crossed all my T's and dotted my I's and did everything I could beforehand. And so now I'm quite passionate about kind of merging what I do with fitness and rehab, and then obviously nutrition's always been a staple. And then hormones. And I've done this with men and women, but I definitely, consider myself more of an expert in the space of men. Just because of the fact that I am a man. I've taken care of myself. Men are a little more straightforward, obviously, than women. We don't have a cycle that changes every month. And so that's why very passionate about helping men now with all aspects of their fitness and wellness, because I know that a lot of the things I did with hormones, even prior to TRT, there was other things as well. And where that ties into, neuroendocrinology, neurotransmitters playing with hormones, has changed my life, not just physically, not just helped me get my body back and my vitality back and my gains in the gym back, but my mental health. Just, this is all connected, obviously, right? You want to look good, you want to feel good. So this is why I'm very passionate about what I do now. And, my philosophy, so to speak, is based in the fact that you're not getting the truth and you're not getting the care that you need, whether it's from your personal trainer who's making your program, your physical therapist who's treating your pain, your endocrinologist who's looking at your hormones, or your doctor who's looking at your hormones. Even if you're on a hormone protocol, I'll be honest with you, I've never seen one from a kind of run-of-the-mill MD or PCP that is good. They don't know how to do it. There's a lot of reasons why, but it's terrible how they run men's hormones. I mean, you look towards some of my testimonials on my website. I got guys who've given me their whole hormone protocol because they said, I can't believe how poorly my doctor was running my TRT protocol, and just what they weren't even looking at. So very passionate about this. My philosophy is I have a systematic philosophy in all these areas, and finding your pain and finding the root cause of what's going on with your overall wellness, right? Hormones, mental health, whatever it is. And being able to take that and systematically kind of go through, like I call low-hanging fruit first, and then, kind of least intervention up to what would be the most intervention. Obviously, if we are going to do hormone replacement, that's kind of the top of the ladder of like an intervention. But there are probably several steps that need to be looked at and taken in between before we just make that leap that doctors don't do. And I've seen guys who've been put on TRT, for example, who maybe didn't even really need it. And now they're on it, and they're on it pretty much for life once you're on it. I mean, you could go off of it. Most people won't, but depending on how long you've been on it. My philosophy is always, there's got to be a system in place. Unfortunately, there's not in medicine. There's certainly not in fitness. And I've developed my own, and it's through learning from the best in the world in these areas and applying and kind of my own experience over 12 years of coaching professionally. So that's a little bit about myself. Again, I'll get into more of these details as I go in my videos and my articles, but I encourage you to check out some of my other videos here. There'll be, videos coming. Subscribe. Please subscribe to the channel if you did find this informative. If this sounds like you, if you relate to this, I know there's a lot of guys that do. If you're kind of stagnant with your gains, if your joints are bothering you all the time, if you just don't feel as good as you could feel, if you just can't lose that belly fat, right? Like and subscribe. If you're on TRT, like and subscribe. I'm going to be giving some tips about how to optimize the protocol as well. And then head over to my website, covertfitwell.com. I post weekly articles there. The link is in my YouTube bio here. And then I also have a Substack where the articles are posted to as well for anybody on there. Obviously, also, my social media channels kind of go on and off Instagram. Need to stay on Instagram. Just not that much of a fan. But most of my content, all my content, daily, weekly, and whatnot, will be, on YouTube here and my website. So be sure to like and subscribe. Head to covertfitwell.com. If you are interested in private or group coaching, I do free consults. So fill out an application form at covertfitwell.com. We can talk. Happy to give an hour of my time. I run through an assessment process to find where your exact weak points are, especially when it comes to people in pain. I have a pretty straightforward assessment process that I do via video. We do it on Zoom if need be. And I have helped a ton of people that way. So appreciate you guys taking the time to watch this video, and see you in the next video.